Good morning, fourth graders. It's Mrs. Orrock again today. Captain Orrock is taking a break. So today, what we're going to be doing for our lesson, we are going to be working on something called, well, first we're going to do something called relative pronouns, okay? So that's the first activity we're going to do, our first little mini lesson. And then following, we'll be reading a chapter in your reader for Treasure Island. The story's about to get exciting. So I'm excited to share the story with you today. What you're going to need is your pencil and your activity book. So let me show you what page you are going to be on. In your activity book today, you will be on the page or activity page number 4.3. The page number it's on is 37 and 38. I find today's lesson extremely interesting, and it's because we're using what we call relative pronouns. Now, relative pronouns replace pronouns. If you have forgotten what some pronouns are, I will list a few for you. So instead of saying the girl, a pronoun we could use is she. Instead of saying the boy, a pronoun we could use would be he. Instead of saying and listing all the people that come to our party, we could just simply use the pronoun they, okay? There's lots of pronouns that we can use. All sorts. Now, we can use those pronouns, and we can also replace those pronouns or start this sentence with any of these what we call relative pronouns, okay? So a relative pronoun is used only in certain times, and it's only used when certain pronouns are used. I'm going to give you some examples after this video, so watch this quick video to learn more about relative pronouns. In the video, it's only going to be focusing on two types of relative pronouns, who and whom. It's interesting because this right here, whom, that was an awful arrow, sorry, that's still not better. This whom right here is not used very often anymore. In fact, they predict that within the next 50 to 75 to maybe even the next 100 years, this right here, whom, will be completely gone. Because there are still words that in the English language that we use, and there are words that we don't use anymore, just because over time they become old-fashioned. So let's learn more about our relative pronouns.
Hello, grammarians. Welcome to one of the thorniest fights in English usage today, the question of whether or not you should use who or whom in a sentence as a relative pronoun. So there's this basic idea that who is the subject form and whom is the object form, which means that if we're talking about someone who is the doer, then we say who, as in the spy who loved me, as opposed to someone who is the doee, the object, as in the spy whom I loved. You see, because in this sentence, who is the subject, and in this sentence, I is the subject, me is the object, and whom is the object. I loved whom. In this sentence, I am doing the loving. In this sentence, it is the spy who is doing the loving. That's the basic rule. But this does not adequately reflect the way our culture actually uses and has used whom or who for some time. In many cases, it has become permissible to use who as an object. Let me show you what I mean. So the thing to remember is that the basic rule is a one-way street, because the way language is changing, whom is on its way out. I imagine in another 50, 75 years, we won't be using it at all. Is that sad? Sure, a little bit. I mean, I'm sad that nobody ever uses the pronoun whoso, as in, whoso pulleth this sword from this stone is rightwise born King of England. We don't use that anymore. It's old-fashioned. Now we say whoever. And that's okay. So we know that the basic rule is that you use who as a subject and whom as an object. But you can also now use who as an object. The only thing you can't do is whom is not a subject. That's the thing you need to remember, is that whom's use is not expanding, it is contracting. Who is taking over some of whom's duties. So let's go back to that spy example. So here are the four possible options, right? The spy who loved me, the spy whom loved me, the spy who I loved, and the spy whom I loved. Now, of these, only this one is incorrect because we're trying to use whom as a subject. But here, the spy who I loved, where who is being an object, by the informal rules of our grammar today, this is fine. Either of these is fine. The only one that's not fine is this guy right here, the spy whom loved me, because this language change is going in one direction, and it's in the direction of whom being used less often. So whom never expands from its original position. Who does. So the next time you're puzzling over what to do in the event of the sentence, who are you talking to, and whether or not this pronoun here should be who or whom, it's really an issue of tone rather than correctness, because they're both possibilities are equally understandable. Yes, technically, if you wanted to be very correct, you would say, whom are you talking to? Or, you are talking to whom? Because whom is the object of this preposition, it's to whom, and so therefore we would use the object form. But you find that when you separate it out in this question, when you put the to at the end and the whom question particle at the beginning, this M just kind of falls away. Because we're more likely to use whom when it's immediately preceded by a preposition. But otherwise, it's probably more likely going to be who. Which is why it's not that big of a deal to say, who are you talking to? It's not technically correct, but it's been used for so long that it's fine. You are talking to who is a little bit more formal of a construction, and therefore you would probably want to use whom. Saying you are talking to who is not as common. So in this wild swamp of rule breaking, there is one hard grammar rule to pay attention to, and it's just never use whom as a subject. The role of whom in our constellation of pronouns is decreasing, not expanding. Who is taking over whom? And since who is the subject, whom is not moving into that space. Whom is the object pronoun, and you use it when you're feeling fancy. You can learn anything. David out.
All right, my friend. So I know that sometimes watching videos from your house, the first time you watch it, you're like, well, that didn't really make as much sense as I wanted it to. So if you're ever feeling like you didn't quite understand the first time, rewatch the video, or you can go back and rewind partway through. Now, in his video, he talked about lots of interesting things. Something to note here is that when you are doing writing, okay, yes, you want to use fancy language. But when you are talking just to your friends, you don't need to use the whom, right? It can be simple, okay? Simple, not fancy. That's what they always say. When you're writing, act like you know what you're talking about. But when you're talking, you can kind of just talk relaxed to your friends. You don't have to get all fancy and use whom correctly. All right, so remember, when you're using relative pronouns and you have who here, you're using the relative pronoun to replace the pronoun. And so you could use who to replace she. In the video, he talked a lot about subject. So if you had the subject that was being replaced, for example, if you were using who as the relative pronoun to replace, remember that can only replace, or most of the time, replace the subject, okay? So, and sometimes he had mentioned that it sometimes goes for object too, just because as time goes on, English language just becomes more relaxed. So remember, this is how I'm going to help you. It's just keep it simple. Who is going to replace the subject? Well, you're asking me, what is the subject? That is when these words are used. She can be a subject of a sentence. It's usually the subject can, not always, but usually at the beginning of the sentence, okay? So that's how I keep track of them. Usually the subject is at the beginning. For example, she went to the store. Who went to the store? She went to the store. So if you can answer the question, who went to the store, and answer it with a subject, you know that you used who correctly. You wouldn't say, whom goes to the store? Because it doesn't work. These are some pronouns that represent subjects. We have she, he, we, and they. Those are just some of them. What about when we get to whom? It says it refers to or replaces the object. So some of the objects in our sentences, her, him, us, them. See how they're slightly different, right? Objects is what the action is happening to. We could say she likes him. Okay, she is doing the liking. He is just being liked by her. He's receiving the object. He is the object. He's receiving the action, but she's actually the subject of a sentence. The last one here that you did not talk about in the video was whose. And whose is really easy, probably the easiest one, because whose is only used when it indicates possession. So if you own something. For example, whose dog is this? That could be your sentence. Whose, meaning whose dog? Someone owns the dog. Someone possesses the dog, right? So whose dog is this? Or whose birthday cake is this? Right? So those are all some examples that you could use. I'm going to go ahead and clear my board. I'm going to scroll down here. In the directions, it says read each pair of sentences, then combine each pair of sentences into one sentence using the appropriate relative pronoun. Be sure to use correct capitalization and punctuation. In the example, it says, Tom is in my class. I borrowed Tom's book. Tom, whose book I borrowed, is in my class. Okay, so Tom, whose book. So since Tom is a he, but we have to think, oh, but it's whose book? It's Tom's book. So we can use whose because it indicates possession. So Tom, whose book I borrowed, is in my class. If we wanted to be more correct, we would say, grab my pencil here, we'd add some commas, Tom, comma, because we can take a breath because we're adding this in, Tom, comma, whose book, comma, I borrowed, excuse me. Tom, whose book I borrowed, comma, is in my class. I like adding commas here. Really, if I had a comma at the beginning and at the end of this phrase, I could literally take this entire phrase out and the sentence would still work. Tom is in my class. Okay, so if you're adding something to a sentence, sometimes you have to do that and add some commas for it to make more sense. Okay, so let's head on back to our number one. Number one says, I asked Elizabeth for a pen. I sit next to Elizabeth in class. So we could say, I asked Elizabeth, which is my middle name, which is kind of cool. Here are our commas, whom I sit next to in class for a pen. So ask yourself, if you got rid of this whole phrase between the commas, would the sentence still work? I asked Elizabeth for a pen. Yes, it would. But we want to keep this whom because it reminds us that we are working with relative pronouns and it makes the sentence more detailed. I asked Elizabeth, whom I sit next to in class, for a pen. Perfect. Number two, my neighbor's flowers are pretty. My neighbor loves to garden. So here we are talking about flowers. The neighbor owns the flowers. It even has the apostrophe to give us a clue. There's an apostrophe S. We're talking about my neighbor's flowers. So we're going to say my neighbor, comma, whose flowers are pretty, comma, loves to garden. Great job. We go one more down. Number three, my brother likes to tell jokes. My brother is funny. You know, that's true. I have a lot of funny brothers, and maybe you feel the same about your siblings. So remember, we're gonna add some commas. My brother, who likes to tell jokes, is, comma, is funny. Now, why did I use who? Why couldn't I use whom? Because I'm referring to my brother, okay? And who, remember, is representing or replacing the subject. He, she, we, or they. And since we're talking about this guy right here, we could say he likes to tell jokes, right? The brother. And since it's he, and the relative pronoun is replacing that subject, we use who. If you forget along the way what it's replacing or what is a subject, what's an object, you just look at my notes from a few minutes ago at the beginning of this paper. Let's go to number 4. I gave the tourist directions. The tourist was lost. What do you think is going to go here? So let's think. The tourist is a person, and we could say is an it, okay? We could also say it's a he or a she. So if it's a subject, you are going to use who here. So I want you to do your own sentence using who, okay? And number 5, I want you to try this one on your own. It says, my sister is smart. My sister works at the library. So you're gonna have to write your own sentence, okay? So on this last sentence right here, or last combination of sentences it gave us, we were going to use who. So you gotta write that on your own. And since we're also talking about my sister, which is a she, that is a subject. So we're going to use the relative pronoun who as well. So on both of these sentences, you're going to use who. All right, my friends, once you are done with the activity page for relative pronouns, I want you to head on over to page number 31. And this is where we're going to review the vocabulary for chapter 3, what we're reading today, called The Real Adventure Begins. Here we go. Coach, a horse-drawn carriage with 4 wheels. If you forget what this is, in Cinderella, Cinderella rides in a coach. Quay, so it looks like quay, but it's pronounced key. A dock, an area at the edge of a waterway where ships land, load, and unload. If you don't know how to pronounce it, there's a pronunciation guide down here. It even says here, this word is pronounced key, and then tells you the page number it's on. Here we have next word, shroud, to cover or conceal. Captivate, to fascinate or capture one's attention. Deduce, to figure out or draw a conclusion. Brim, to become full or overflowing. Scoundrel, a wicked or disreputable person. So this basically means a person that's not respectable. And nautical, relating to the sea or sailors. And berth, an area below deck where crew members would sleep. Let's head on over to chapter 3. In your electronic reader, make sure you find page number 22. That is where you're going to begin your chapter. In the last chapter, we read it twice, so we should be very familiar with what happened at the end of chapter 2. Here we go. Chapter 3, the real adventure begins. Very exciting stuff. Okay. I said farewell to my beloved mother and the dear Admiral Benbow, and then joined up with Redruth, the squire's gamekeeper. We purchased our seats for the coach to Bristol. It picked us up around dusk, and we arrived in Bristol as the sun was rising like a shimmering peach above the city. Squire Trelawney was residing at an inn near the water, along the quay. Excuse me, I said it wrong, and I even looked at the pronunciation guide. Here we go. Along the quay. And if you forget, it told us how to pronounce it, quay. Along the quay lay ships of all sizes and nations. In one, sailors were singing as they worked in the morning fog that shrouded the quay. In another, men high up in the rigging were hanging by threads that seemed no sturdier than those of a spider's web. An overwhelming smell of tar and salt filled the air. I spotted old sailors with pigtails and rings in their ears. It was all new to me, and I was captivated. This was definitely gathering his attention. We went to see the squire. He was dressed like a naval officer. So naval, meaning navy, okay? So someone who works in the water, right? In a new suit. There you are, he cried. The doctor arrived last night. Now our ship's company is complete. We'll set sail early in the morning at first light, meaning right first thing in the morning. Here we have a picture of that Admiral Benbow Inn, and mother is so sad to say goodbye to her sweet, sweet boy. Okay, Jim is probably excited. His mom's probably more sad than he is. But he does, you can tell he loves his mother because he's saying beloved mother here. The squire handed me a note to carry to Long John Silver. I made my way along the crowded quay full of people and loaded carts until I found the tavern. It was brighter and cleaner than I expected. The windows glistened and the floor was cleanly sanded. Okay, remember, boats are made out of wood. And they have to keep them sanded to get all the grime and kind of get all the slivers kind of sanded out, right? Get them smooth. The customers were seafaring men talking loudly and enthusiastically among one another. As I was waiting, a man emerged from a side room. He has one leg. Who could it be? I deduced, meaning he figured it out, right? Gathering its information, that he must be Long John Silver. Oh, his left leg was missing, and he walked with the aid of a crutch. He managed the crutch with wonderful skill, hopping about it on it like a sprightly bird, meaning just lots of energy, young. Silver, meaning Long John Silver, was tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, yet brimming with intelligence. He whistled as he moved among the tables and had a merry word or a slap on the shoulder for each of the guests, so he seems like a pretty happy guy. From the first mention of John Silver in the squire's letter, I had feared that he might be the very one-legged sailor I had watched out for at the Admiral Benbow. So I don't know. Here he's kind of not really sure if he's that same person that he was told to watch out for. But one look at the man was enough to convince me I had nothing to fear. I had seen the captain, I had seen Black Dog, and I had seen Pew. I thought I knew what a buccaneer looked like, and they were quite different from this clean and likable landlord. Mr. Silver, sir? I asked hesitantly. Yes, lad, said he. When Silver saw I had a letter from the squire, he seemed startled. Oh, he said quite loudly, you must be our new cabin boy. Just then, one of the customers rose suddenly and ducked out the door. Although the man made a hurried exit, I had time enough to catch a glimpse of his face. It was a man who had visited the captain at the Admiral Benbow, the man with the 2 missing fingers. Someone stop him, I cried. He's Black Dog. 2 of the men sitting near the door leaped up and chased after the 8-fingered man. Remember, 5 fingers plus 3 fingers is 8, because he's missing 2 on the other hand. So there he goes. What was that you said, boy? John Silver asked. Black what? Black Dog, I replied. Didn't Mr. Trelawney tell you about the buccaneers? Oh, and I skipped over this picture. I noticed him, but here we have Long John Silver and then the other man. Black Dog was one of them. Was he indeed? Cried Silver. Black Dog, did you say? The name's not familiar, but I think I've seen him. He used to come here with them, blind beggar. Yes, I said, that would be old Pew. Yes, cried Silver, his voice rising as all kinds of thoughts clearly flooded his mind. Pew, that were his name, all right. I'll never fear, my men will run him down. However, the moment I saw Black Dog in Silver's tavern, I sensed something was wrong. Why was he there, and was Silver telling the truth when he said he did not know him? I watched Silver closely, but he continued to create the impression that he was an honest man. The 2 men came back out of breath and confessed they had lost Black Dog in a crowd by the quay. Silver scolded them, meaning he got angry at them, and shook his head in a display of disappointment. Well, Hawkins, said Silver, we had better go and tell the squire about this, eh? Here this scoundrel is sitting in my house right in front of me. We wouldn't want the squire to get the wrong idea now, would we? As we walked around the quay, Silver proved himself a most interesting companion. We even stopped beside a large sailing ship as he pointed out its different parts and the proper terms for each one. He taught me nautical terms such as fore and aft and starboard and port. He showed me the forecastle at the front of the ship and the quarterdeck toward the back. He pointed at the mainmast in the middle. The mainmast is that big mast where the flag is attached. Super important. And the crow's nest on top, that's where someone would sit. The crow's nest was the spot where sailors went to keep a lookout. He explained that the cables sailors used to raise a sail are called halyards. He had me repeat these phrases until I could recite them perfectly. I knew he was the best possible shipmate for a novice sailor like me. Novice meaning beginner. You don't know much. When we got to the inn, Silver made Mr. Trelawney and Dr. Legsy an account of all that had happened. I won't stand for scoundrels of that sort in my tavern, he said, but there was not much chance of me catching him myself with this old timber I hobble on, so I sent 2 of my mates after him. Thought they might catch him, but in the end he slipped away. And that's what happened, isn't it, Hawkins? It is, I said. The doctor and the squire were sorry that Black Dog had escaped, but they agreed there was nothing else to be done. Then Silver paid me a compliment. This is a fine lad you signed up, he said, a good fellow and smart as paint. I was pleased by this compliment, and I smiled as Silver hobbled away. All hands on deck by 4 this afternoon, the squire shouted after him. Aye, aye, sir, cried Silver. Well, said Dr. Lively to the squire, as a rule, I don't put much faith in your discoveries, but this John Silver suits me. Yes, said the squire, he's quite a remarkable man. Remarkable meaning amazing. Later, we boarded the ship while the supplies were being loaded. As soon as we were on board, the captain paid us a visit. Well, Captain Smollett, said the squire, how are you? All's well with you, I hope. I am well, sir, said the captain, but I must tell you, I've had a bad feeling about this voyage, and I don't care for some of the seamen you've hired. Hey, so right here, this paragraph, the beginning of the page, or looks like third paragraph, it is another example of foreshadowing. Remember, foreshadowing is a book's intention to give you clues about what could happen in the future. So if he's not feeling good about the voyage, what could happen? Here they are talking. And especially during this time, these are all wigs, okay? They'd wear these white wigs with their suits and suit coats because it made them feel more and look more proper or wealthy. The squire was extremely offended by this remark. Perhaps you do not like your employer either, replied the squire. But here Dr. Lively cut in. Hold on, Trelawney, said Dr. Livesey. Let's hear what Captain Smollett has to say. Captain Smollett addressed the doctor. I was engaged, sir, to sail the ship where the gentleman would bid me. Now I find that every seaman on board knows more than I do. I hear that we're going after treasure. I don't like to involve myself in secret treasure voyages, especially when the secret is no longer secret. Why, even a parrot seems to know our business. There's one of their little exotic animal. Do you mean Silver's parrot? Asked the squire. Gentlemen, do you understand what you're getting yourself into? Came the captain's reply. We most certainly do, said the squire. Please explain, said Dr. Livesey. What is it that you don't like about the crew? I should have been able to pick them myself, explained Captain Smollett. I do not approve of your officer. He's a good seaman, but he's too friendly, familiar, if you like, with the crew. And another thing, the men are putting the guns and powder in the forehold. Remember, he explained where that was in the boat. I don't like that. Why not put them under the cabin and give our own people the berths where they sleep under deck? Is there anything else? Asked the squire. Yes, said the captain. I've heard the exact latitude and longitude. Ooh, you guys remember what that is? Latitude, lines up and down. Longitude, excuse me, blah, blah, blah. Latitude is fatitude, lines across. Longitude is long lines up and down. I've heard the exact latitude and longitude of our island location. I've heard you have a map of the island. I've even heard this map shows the exact location of treasure, as all good treasure maps should do. Egad, cried the squire. I did not tell a soul about any of this. Gentlemen, continued the captain, I don't know who has the map, but I ask that it be kept somewhere secret, even from me. If you won't do that much, I would ask you to let me resign. I see, said the doctor. You are afraid the men may mutiny. Remember, go against the captain. Sir, said Captain Smollett, they may be honest men, but for all I know, but I am responsible for the ship's safety and the life of every man aboard. I'm concerned, and I ask you to be cautious or let me resign, meaning quit. That's all. Trelawney grumbled, but eventually he agreed. I will do as you wish, he said, sighing deeply, but it grieves me that you do not trust me. As you please, sir, said Captain Smollett. You'll find I do my duty. And with that he left. Trelawney, said the doctor, I believe you have at least two good men on board, that man and John Silver. Silver, perhaps, cried the squire, still in a huff, but I believe Captain Smollett to be difficult and downright rude. Well, said the doctor, we shall see. Early the next morning we lifted anchor in Cecil. The Española began her voyage to Treasure Island. The Española proved to be a good ship. The captain and crew were very capable, meaning very able to do hard work. I was especially fond of Long John Silver, or Barbecue. Ooh, interesting name. I wonder why they call him Long John Silver Barbecue, as some of the men call him. He was always glad to see me in the ship's galley, which he kept as clean as a pin. The old sea cook even introduced me to his pet parrot. This is Captain Flint, he told me, named for the famous buccaneer, and she predicts success for our voyage, don't you, Captain? I wondered at the choice of name. So who is this Captain Flint? Now, if we go back to our character chart, Captain Flint is, or excuse me, who is this Captain Flint? Who is this Captain Flint? If we go back and think, Captain Flint is a pretty ferocious captain or pirate back in the day. So now he's wondering, meaning Jim Hawkins, he's wondering at the choice of the name, why is he naming his parrot that? All right, here is our picture here. The captain's looking around, kind of hesitating of what they're doing and where they're putting the guns. They look interesting. There's Jim. Then the parrot squawked, "Pieces of eight, pieces of eight." "That bird is maybe 200 years old," said Silver. "If anyone's seen more wickedness, it must be the devil himself. She sailed with Captain England, the pirate, I reckon. That's how she learned about pieces of eight." Silver gave the bird a lump of sugar and smiled in a way that made me think he was either the best of men or the worst of men. So here's the picture. He's just chilling here, the bottom. All the crewmen respected, and this is so if you actually open your blue book side by side, this would be one picture. All the crewmen respected and obeyed Silver. He had a way of talking to everybody and doing each one some particular service. "He's no common man, Barbecue," Israel Hands, one of the crew, told me. "He can speak like a book when he wants, and he's brave. A lion's got nothing alongside him. I've seen him, unarmed, grapple 4 men and knock their heads together." I had no doubt that Silver was a man to be reckoned with. Reckon means like he's tough, you don't want to mess with him. Here he is. So there's his little there's his little walking stick. All right, so here's Long John Silver. Here's his little walking stick and his parrot. Likes to smoke tobacco out of his pipe, it looks like. Okay, and that was the end of our chapter 3. I want you to look back at the pictures and look back at some of the important parts in this story, especially when there's a lot of dialogue or talking going on, okay? Because that's going to give you some good clues. All right, my friends, I want you to head on over to your character chart here. Remember, it's on page 5 and page 6. So we're going to be on page 6 today. I just added in what we added in last time. So what we're going to be, your assignment today, what you're going to be adding is to your character chart, new things that you have been learning about Long John Silver, or Barbecue as they call him. Now, this is what we had last time. Last time, we wrote down that he was hired as a cook on the ship and has 1 leg. Your assignment today is to add more. So grab your pencil. What more did you learn? Okay, so if you don't know, go back to the chapter and type down what you learned about Long John Silver today. There should be a few things that you can add to this little box. Is there anything that you learned as well about Captain Smollett? So you can add, remember this is in chapter 3 of what we just read. Okay, chapter 3. And what else did you learn about Long John Silver and Captain Smollett? And add that in. That is your assignment for today. Thanks for working so hard today, friends. Now, if you need to pause the video at any time and rewind and go back and get more help, please feel free to. Remember, your most important thing is to watch the whole lesson and complete the assignment that goes with it, and then do the exit tickets. Let's see what we have in our little treasure box. What do we have for our pirate adventure today? What's the little surprise? Oh, this is a good one. Skip one of the activity pages. So, I was going to give you another assignment, but since this says skip one of the activity pages, I'm not going to give you the extra assignment I was going to give you. So I was going to give you the character chart, which I still want you to do, but I was also going to have you do this activity with vocabulary words. So since I pulled out of the treasure box that we get to skip an activity page, I want you to skip this one. Okay, this is one I was going to have you do as extra work. It was on page 43. And now you get to skip that one. So now you have a pretty easy assignment. All you have to do is fill in your character chart for 2 characters, and then get to be done. Pretty nice. All right. It was good to be with you, friends, today. I will see you tomorrow.